Good morning. Well, thank you for joining us online today, man. I am so honored that you would choose to join us this morning. My name is Matt. I'm the minister here at North Christian Church. And I just want to acknowledge, hey, if you're joining us live on Sunday morning, whether you're on the streaming platform or on YouTube or on Facebook, or if you're watching this outside of our normal Sunday morning times, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today as we open the Word together, as we hear from God and what He wants to say to us this morning or whenever you're watching this. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. As we dive in, we are today beginning really a new series that we are calling Here, There. And this is a study that we're going to do through the book of 1 Peter. And we are just going to take this kind of chunk by chunk over the next several weeks and really just try to dive in and see what God wants to say to us from this letter that Peter wrote in 1 Peter. And here's kind of the thing that we want to do. We want to talk about how we can live as citizens here and there. And I don't know about you, but I've kind of always had this desire to want to go to one of those places that you can go to and be in two different places at once. You know what I'm talking about? Like there's a place where you cross this bridge, and on one side of this river is Nebraska, just outside of Omaha, and then it crosses this river, and you are entering into Iowa. And on this bridge, you can kind of stand at this one place, and there's actually a line in the concrete, and on one side it says Nebraska, and on the other side it says Iowa, and you can stand kind of straddling that line, and you can exist in Nebraska and Iowa, and I get it. Why would you ever want to cross from the good life of Nebraska into Iowa? I get that, but just for kind of sentimental reasons, I've always kind of wanted to go to a place like that and stand and take your picture like most people do, right? But I've never been to any place like that. You can go down to other places as well, and like the Four Corners and do that as well. I've never been in this place, though, where I can be present kind of in two different places until this past week. I have a really almost laughable example, finally, of me being able to exist in two places, and it looks like this. This is Monday night in my office. I have two different Zoom meetings going on at the same time. This is my horrible example of this. On my computer here, and this is the meeting that I'm actually interacting with during this time. This is our church elders here. And that's my little box right there, but some of the guys are there. That's the meeting that I'm interacting with. But down here on my iPad, I also have open a board meeting for the swim club that my kids are a part of. I'm on the board for that swim club, and that's my little box right there, and it's blacked out because I'm not actually engaging in that meeting. I'm just kind of present, but I kind of leaned back in the midst of a fairly deep conversation that we were having as a leadership team. I kind of leaned back and snapped a picture of being present in both of these places. I know that's a fairly shallow example of this, but here's kind of the reality for us, especially as believers. We are called to live really in two different places. As we follow Jesus, we are really called to live here as well as there. Here meaning in this world. We're called to live and be a part of this world, be active in this world. But what we're going to learn over the course of several weeks here is that we're actually called as believers to be a part of the kingdom of heaven as well, to be a citizen in the kingdom of heaven as well. And so as we work our way through 1 Peter, we want to discover this kind of together. We are going to look at how we're called to live here as well as called to live as a part or a member of the kingdom of heaven as we unpack this together. And at times we're going to jump around. Today we're going to jump around a little bit, but we're going to cover basically entirely the book or the letter of 1 Peter together over about the next 8 weeks or so. And so here's what I want to encourage you to do as we kind of begin working our way through 1 Peter. I want to encourage you and I want to invite you to read through 1 Peter with us collectively as a church. And I would encourage you over the next 8 weeks or so as we are working our way through 1 Peter, once a week, just open to 1 Peter and read through it completely. There is so much truth and there's so much wisdom in this book. I want us, to the best that we can, to engage with this book and learn from it. And so I want to invite you and encourage you over the next 8 weeks, hey, just grab your Bible, sit down once a week, and read through the book of 1 Peter in its entirety. It takes about 10 minutes or so. I read it out loud in about 10 minutes, and so I'm sure you can read through it silently to yourself, maybe a little bit faster than that. But I want us to get as much out of this as possible. And here's what we're going to learn through this study of 1 Peter. The overarching kind of theme or the overarching truth that I think that we're going to hear throughout this book is this. Peter says this. He says, we are called to live lives present in the world here on earth. We're called to live lives being present here in this earth, where we are at right now. We're called to live lives present in the world here on earth, while also living as citizens there in the kingdom of heaven. Peter's challenging us to live here, be present here in the world that we're in here, as well as be present in the kingdom of God there. Let's dive into this morning. 1 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 1. This is what Peter says. He says, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, and to the temporary residents dispersed in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, and set apart by the Spirit for disobedience and for sprinkling with the blood of Jesus Christ. May grace and peace be multiplied in you. Let's break this down a little bit and let's kind of get into the background here a little bit. The year is somewhere in the mid to early AD 60s, AD 60 to AD 65 or so, which places the writing of this book about 30 years after Jesus was on earth here. Jesus was present in his ministry years about AD 30 to AD 33. This is about 30 years after that. And in that 30 years, the church following after Jesus has just exploded extremely. The church is beginning to reach places around the known area that they wouldn't have even dreamt of 30 years before at that moment. But it's starting to spread and it's reaching different areas. And the Apostle Peter probably finds himself in Rome, possibly even under house arrest, as he's writing to these churches that are receiving this. And Peter starts off by saying who he is. He states, it's Peter writing this to you, and understand who this is. This is the Apostle Peter, who was the disciple Peter. This is the Peter that walked with Jesus. This is the Peter who was one of Jesus's kind of inner three guys that Jesus poured into a little bit more in his life. This is the same Peter that denied Jesus 3 times while Jesus was being taken off and arrested before his crucifixion. This is the same Peter that had that beautiful kind of moment after Jesus rose back and walked out of the grave, where Jesus was kind of restating his purpose and reinstating him as a follower of Jesus. This is the same Peter that was very active through the book of Acts in starting the church. This is that same Peter, and Peter finds himself writing to Christians, to believers throughout a larger area that is now known as Turkey. And you can, in fact, look up some of these places that were mentioned in the beginning verses of 1 Peter, and you can find where these cities either do or used to exist. And so Peter starts off and he identifies who he is, and then he throws this statement out here. He says, according to the foreknowledge of God the Father. According to the foreknowledge of God the Father, here's the truth that I don't want us to miss this morning as we begin diving into this. Nothing surprises God. Nothing surprises God. Nothing surprises God. God's not sitting up there in heaven somewhere going, whoa, man, I didn't see that coming, right? Like nothing that the first century church was going through surprised God. They didn't, get some persecution pushed their way, and God was up there. He wasn't sitting up there going, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize they were going to be persecuted for following me." More recently, a few years ago, God wasn't sitting up there going, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize Donald Trump was going to get elected," or "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize coronavirus was going to spread like it is," or "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize there's going to be the economic hardship like it was," or "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize this sickness was going to be present," or whatever it is. God's not taken off guard by anything. Nothing can surprise God. But with that, let me say this. I think sometimes I think we view God as kind of the mean boy outside with the magnifying glass that's kind of up in the sky. And I know this probably wasn't you, but you understand the concept, right? Like boys get their magnifying glasses, go outside, find a bug or an insect, and try to burn it, right? I found myself doing this as a kid. Like we'd get a magnifying glass, go outside and find a grasshopper, and you get the sun to shine through the magnifying glass just right, and you can really torch some things that way, right? Like you can really make some things burn pretty good that way. Like here's the reality. God is not up in heaven trying to torch us. God is not up in heaven intentionally trying to cause a bunch of bad things to happen to us all. Like that's not what's taking place. I remember Kimmy and I were dating at the time we were in college, and we were coming home from my parents' house, and we needed to borrow their minivan for an event that we were doing at the college. And so we're driving home from my parents' house, and it's dark and it's in the fall, and we're about, 10 minutes maybe away from the college, just outside of Scotts Bluff, and a deer runs out in front of us, and we hit the deer, and it wipes out the entire front of the minivan, just totals the minivan. It is an old minivan, and it wouldn't have taken much, but just totals this minivan. We're sitting on the side of the road. It's dark out. My parents were actually out of town, and so we had to call some friends in order to kind of come get us and help us kind of get situated and get back to the dorms. And as we're driving back to the dorms that night, I can't help but in my mind think, man, is this like some punishment that God is putting us through? Like, is there some reason why this happened? Like what's God trying to do to me? Is he trying to punish me for some reason? And let me just say this and ask this: Is it possible for God to reach out and to miraculously stop some accident or some event from taking place? Like, would it have been possible for God to reach out and miraculously stop that deer from running out in front of us and destroying my parents' minivan? And the answer is yes, of course. Like he has and will continue to do miraculous things and so many things that we don't even understand. Absolutely, he can do that. But sometimes when bad things happen, we also go to the opposite extreme, right? When we say, man, that bad thing happened, that had to be God up in heaven flexing his muscles, right? Like he's trying to teach me a lesson. He's trying to discipline me, like he's trying to show me, or whatever the case may be. And we go to this opposite extreme, but here's the reality. Sometimes, I believe, it's just a deer running out in front of you. Like sometimes it's just a car accident that you got into. Like sometimes it's just the result of a bad decision. Or sometimes it's just the effects of a toxic family member in your life, or sometimes it's just the result of a serious illness, or sometimes it's maybe just the result of the coronavirus. Like maybe it's not God up in heaven flexing his muscles, trying to make a statement, trying to get us in line, trying to make a scene out of anything. Maybe it's not the hand of God striking us down. Maybe it's just something happening. And I get it, right? Like in the midst of it, when we're in the midst of what's going on, like it's hard for us not to just think, man, like this is God disciplining us. This is God trying to teach us something. And I'm not saying that it's not God trying to teach you something, but it could just be an accident. It could just be something happening in your life. Several years ago, since we've been living here in Cheyenne, we had a handy-down car that we drove for a few years. We were coming back from Casper from a party that we were at, and it was Kimmy and I think we had 2 kids maybe at the time. in the back seat, and we're driving home from Casper on like a Saturday afternoon or evening, and something happens in the motor. The car starts overheating. We don't get it shut down and cooled off fast enough, and it basically warps the heads on the car, and the car's ultimately totaled. And we're sitting on the side of the interstate, trying to figure out what to do. And so get some friends. They graciously come up and load it up on a trailer for us and take it home for us. And so after this happens, we get a loaner car from my parents. And you'll see kind of a habit forming here. Now, we get a loaner car from my parents, and it just so happens that as we're driving this car and trying to figure out what we're going to do for another vehicle, that car starts to have some problems in it as well. And we are literally driving this car down to Fort Collins to purchase the minivan that we were going to buy for our family. Literally driving it down. We're just north of Fort Collins, and it breaks down on the side of the interstate. And as we are riding into Fort Collins, and as we're driving home later on that day, we're riding to Fort Collins. The guy who we're buying the minivan from graciously agrees to come pick us up off the side of the interstate and then take us into Fort Collins so we can take care of paperwork. But, as this is all happening the rest of the day, I can't help but in my mind just think, my goodness, like God is disciplining me. Like, what did I do wrong? God, what did I do wrong? Like, why is this happening? What did I do in order to deserve this discipline? And I texted this to a friend of mine in the moment. I'm just like, I just feel like God is disciplining me somehow, like I did something wrong, like a child. And of course, that's not the truth. But honestly, in the moment, it really feels that way, doesn't it? In the moment, it felt true. And what we know about these Christians that Peter is writing to in this first letter of Peter's, First Peter here, we understand and we know that they were going through some significant persecution in their life. Like, their lives were difficult, their lives were hard, and Peter here, right out of the gate, wants to reassure them of something significant. And he wants to reassure us today here of something as well. He wants to reassure them, your suffering doesn't surprise God. Your suffering doesn't surprise God. And so the question that we need to answer this morning really is this: how, as followers of Jesus, how do we live here and there? As followers of Jesus, how do we live both here and there? How do we live as citizens here on this earth as well as citizens in the kingdom of heaven? How do we live both here and there? Well, we want to camp down on about 6 things this morning. I want to share 6 things with you on how we can do that, how we can live both here and there. The first one is this: we need to obey Jesus. We need to obey Jesus. Like, I think one of the reasons why people are so hesitant to believe in and follow God is because we, as just a society and as a people, and are just so against submission. We're just so against almost authority in our lives. Like, we just don't like the idea of submitting to anybody else. I mean, just look around us now. Like, people are literally starting to fight for what they believe their rights are because they feel like they're being taken away from them. Like, we don't like submitting to people. We don't like submitting to authorities. We don't like submitting to people who are considered to be over us. And we love and we crave control in our lives. We love and crave control in our lives. And yet, to follow Jesus, it's bigger than just believing in God and believing in the existence of God and Jesus. It really is about submitting. It really is about obeying. It really is about wholeheartedly following God. We need to learn to submit. And here's the thing, like with that, it's not just a decision that we make once, kind of in an initial thing. We don't say, yeah, I'm going to surrender my life to Jesus, and we never think about that again. It is almost a daily, if not moment by moment, decision that we have to consciously make. Today I'm going to surrender to follow Jesus. Right now in this moment, even though I don't feel like I want to, even though I don't necessarily know what's going on, I'm going to surrender to follow Jesus. I'm going to obey Jesus. We really want to get to the place that we say, it's beyond belief. It is belief, but it's also submission. It's also following. It's also obeying God and Jesus. And so we need to obey Jesus. Number two, the second thing I want us to realize this morning is that we need to allow grace to be multiplied in us. We need to allow grace to be multiplied in us. And this is what Peter talked about in those opening verses, that grace and peace, and we're going to get to peace in a minute, be multiplied in us. Grace is such a beautiful thing, isn't it? Like, it really is a wonderful thing that we all love. We all love receiving grace, don't we? Like as believers, we need it, we accept it. But the thing with grace really is that, when we receive it from God, we also need to be willing to give it away as well. That's what Peter's talking about when he says, allow grace to be multiplied within you. The thing that we receive from God so readily, the grace that we receive from God so readily, so easily, is also the thing that we need to extend to so many other people. And I think this is where our trouble is. Because I think we're all about getting grace. And I think we're all about, being on the receiving side of that. We need it, we want it, we crave it, we need it in order to exist. Nobody's gonna look at what Jesus did on the cross and say, nope, I don't need that grace, right? Like, no believer is going to say, you know what, God, keep your grace. I don't need it. I don't want it. I'll get there on my own. Like, no believer is going to say that. But how often do we withhold grace from somebody else who wronged us? I mean, think about it. How easy is it for us to go from receiving grace from God, and almost in the next breath sometimes, we will refuse to offer grace to somebody who has hurt us, who has wronged us, who has taken advantage of us. Like, how often do we do that? How often do we struggle with offering grace to people around us? How often do we withhold grace when we've been wronged or upset by somebody else? How often are we quick to cut people loose or quick to retaliate in a much worse way to somebody who may hurt us, all the while receiving all the grace from God? We as believers sometimes are the worst at showing grace to people around us. We as believers sometimes are just really, really bad at showing grace, and yet how powerful would it be? I mean, really, how powerful would it be for us to get really good at leading with grace in our lives? How powerful, and what kind of statement would it make to the world around us if we as the church would lead with grace in our lives? If we would lead with showing people grace who have wronged us, who have hurt us, who have taken advantage of us. We need to be able to say, as believers, that we're allowing grace to be multiplied in our lives. Number three, third thing that Peter wants to share with us is that we need to allow peace to be multiplied in us. We need to allow peace to be multiplied in us. This is what Peter says later on in 1 Peter chapter 2. He says, "Dear friends, I urge you as strangers and temporary residents to abstain from the fleshly desires that war against you. Conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, so that in a case where they speak against you as those who do what is evil, they will, by observing your good works, glorify God on the day of visitation." This is what Peter is saying to us, that we so often are pulled to this kind of temptation of indulging the fleshly desires, is what Peter says. Paul, earlier in the New Testament, in the book of Galatians, he talks about the fleshly desires. It's things like sexual immorality, and impurity, and idolatry, and hatred, and jealousy, and anger, and selfishness, and drunkenness, and other things like this. Like, this is the fleshly desire. And the reality is like in the moment when we're indulging in these things, we don't feel a lot of guilt for them. Like, maybe it was last night, maybe it was last week, maybe it was, a daily thing, maybe it was this morning, maybe it was, some time where you were sleeping around with your girlfriend, or you're getting drunk, or you're getting high, or you're gambling uncontrollably, or you're gossiping about somebody else, or you're hoarding all the toilet paper. Like, I don't know what you do, but in the moment, like, we can kind of justify what we're doing. We can kind of push down the feeling, but how about now? How about right now? How do you feel right now in this moment? Maybe even in the presence of God. How do you feel right now? Do you have peace inside? Like in the moment when we're yelling at our kids, so oftentimes it's justified, but after the fact, when you're starting to think through what that was like, do you have peace in that moment? Do you have peace there? Or does it stir up something else? More times than not, after the fact, when we can sit and we can kind of consider what's been going on, so many times we don't have peace in our lives from this. And this is, look again at what Peter said. He says, conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles. Make sure that how you're acting is honorable among those who see you, so that in a case where they speak against you, those who do what is evil, they will, by observing your good works, glorify God on the day of visitation. If we want to find peace in our lives, let's live lives in such a way that when people observe what we're doing, observe your good works, observe your life that you're living, like when we're living our lives, let's live in such a way that people have to glorify God because of the lives that we are living. Like we should be living in a way that when people who don't believe look on, they go, man, that has to be because of the God that they follow. This generates peace in us. This generates this life of peace within us. And so we need to allow peace to be multiplied in our life. Let's look at the next one. Number 4, Peter says, we need to live hopefully. If we want to live here as well as there, we need to live hopefully. We need to live hopefully. Throughout the New Testament, there is this concept called being born again. You read it throughout the New Testament, and it's largely connected to this kind of process of being immersed, of being baptized into Christ as part of kind of the conversion experience. And it really pictures this idea of the waters of childbirth, and it likens that to baptism as well. Like we have to go through the waters of childbirth in order to be born. We need to go through the waters of immersion, of baptism, in order to be born again as well. And for so many of us, like our conversions were and still are like total game changers for us, right? Like it changed our worlds, like our past behavior, our past lives are just totally different from the lives that we live now. But on another sense, it's also a game changer because it gives us hope. It gives us hope in something greater than what is going on in this world. And this is what Peter talks about, is that we're given a hope because of Jesus and what Jesus did. He went to the cross, he died, and he went into the grave, and then 3 days later he walked out of that grave. And it can give us hope in something so much greater than this life. Because here, and you know it, right? Like if we're just living here with no thought about living there as well, if we're just in our life here on this earth, like life can be so helpless sometimes, can't it? It can just be so helpless and ultimately so meaningless. Like we can have pain and fear and struggle and sickness and heartbreak and divorce and job loss and abuse. Like there is no hope this side of eternity. But our hope isn't in this side of eternity. It's not in our life here on this earth. Our hope is there. Our hope is in the kingdom of God where our inheritance is. Because this is what Peter said. And he says it in 1 Peter chapter 1, 1 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 3, continuing on where we left off. He says, praise the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into a living hope. There it is. Through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that is imperishable, that is uncorrupted, that is unfading, and kept in heaven for you. You are being protected by God's power through faith for a salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. This is the hope that we are talking about. This is the hope that we are called to live in. We are born again. We are given hope because of what Jesus did on the cross. And we are given an inheritance. And this is what he says about that inheritance. He says that our inheritance, it is imperishable. It never dies. It never goes away. He says our inheritance is uncorrupted. It can't be messed up. It can't be ruined. It can't be blemished. And our inheritance is unfading. It doesn't lose its sparkle or its genuineness over time. Like, this is where our hope is. It's kept there for us. It's not wishful thinking. It's not, man, I sure hope that works out or that pans out in the end. No, we can put our hope in this because it is true and it is real and it is sure. We must not lose our minds. We must not live uncontrollably. We must not lose our composure and character. We must not lose our peace and live in a state of fear. We must not give up. We must live hopefully, Peter says. We must live hopefully. And then he continues on. Number 5. If we want to live here as well as there, we need to live joyfully. We need to live joyfully. We need to live joyfully. This is what he says. Verse 6. You what? You rejoice in this, though now for a short time you have had to struggle in various trials. You live joyfully, even in the midst of living in trials. We need to live joyfully. We need to live joyfully. Here's the reality. Hear me. Joy is not an attitude. It's an attitude. It's a mentality, It's not a mood. Happiness is a mood. Happiness is almost a feeling, right? Happiness ultimately can't stand up against struggle, against trial, against persecution, against difficulties. Like happiness is weak, it has no foundation, and when it gets presented with things going against it, man, it just doesn't hold up. Happiness just can't hold up to those things. But joy, here's the thing, joy stands strong. Joy stands strong, and it is the proof of the presence of God in our lives. Joy is the proof of the presence of God. And those who Peter was writing to here, they were in the midst of struggle. They were in the midst of severe and intense persecution. And Peter wants their suffering and our suffering to be framed in joy here. Because here's the truth. Don't miss this. This is the truth that I don't want us to miss. Happiness is a reaction. Happiness is a reaction to what takes place around us. Happiness is because of the circumstances that are happening right in front of us, right immediately. But don't miss this. Joy is a decision. Joy is a decision. Peter is encouraging them and he's encouraging us to make the decision to have joy in their lives and in our lives. Don't rely only on happiness. Happiness is a reaction. Our joy is a decision that we can have. And this encouragement continues. 1 Peter chapter 3, if we jump up there, starting in verse 15. He goes on and says, "But honor the Messiah as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the what? For the hope that is in you. However, do this with gentleness and respect, keeping your conscience clear." We are all going to suffer. We are all going to have struggle in our lives. We are all going to have pain and difficulty from time to time. Like it's just going to happen. And so we, as believers, we need to prepare for it. We need to be ready for it. We need to prepare ourselves so that when struggle happens, we can explain and we can show to others where our joy comes from. Where our joy comes from. So, we need to live in joy. We need to make the decision to have joy. Number 6. This is number 6 for us that Peter says here. He says, when you're trying to live a life that's here as well as there, we need to never quit. We need to never quit. We must understand that the world that we are living in, that this world that we are in has its beauty and has its awe-inspiring things. In fact, this is what Peter says going on in 1 Peter chapter 1, kind of continuing on. He says, "You rejoice in this, though for now a short time you have had to struggle in various trials, so that the genuineness of your faith, more valuable than gold, which perishes though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. You love him, though you have not seen him. And though not seeing him now, you believe in him and rejoice with the inexpressible and glorious joy because you are receiving the goal of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Peter encourages us, don't quit. Never quit. This life we are living, like what he talks about there, full of beauty, full of awe-inspiring things, full of awesome experiences, is also full of struggles, and is also full of pain, and is also full of sickness and difficulty that we're going to go through. This life, full of all of those things, is not our home. This life is not our home. We are, as that song says, just passing through. We are just passing through. This is not our home. The first century Christians knew that this world was not their home. They knew that they were just here for a moment before they went there to their true home, and that they would have to endure some horrific forms of punishment and persecutions while they were here, and yet they knew to never quit. I want to read for you just, if you would allow me to read a short statement that gives a clear picture of what things were like during the first century for these people. It says this: 1 Peter was most likely written around AD 65 during the reign of Nero. Nero came into power at age 16. His mother secured the throne for him by poisoning his father. When Nero came to power, he rewarded his mother by having her killed. Nero was afraid that his mother would take the throne from him in the same way, and the same fear inspired Nero to kill then his own wife as well. In AD 64, Rome burned, and a respected Roman historian claimed that Nero started the fire so that he could rebuild the city in his own image. When the people became angry, Nero pointed to the Christians and made them scapegoats, and it worked. The Christians became the target of various forms of persecution. And to make sure he was believed in accusing the Christians of setting the fire, he had many of them killed. Some of them were crucified in the arena, others were thrown to wild animals, and still others were burned alive as living torches to light Nero's garden at his golden house. Peter died, the writer of 1 Peter, Peter died during the Neronian persecutions, being crucified upside down. Because of this most well-known persecution, Nero was written into history as one of the most depraved and cruel of the Roman emperors ever to live. This is the life that the recipients of 1 Peter were living in. This was the context that they were living in. And then this is why Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12, this is why he writes, "Dear friends, don't be surprised when the fiery ordeal comes among you to test as if something unusual were happening to you." Don't be surprised, Peter says, when what you hear about going on around you may in fact come to you personally. Don't be surprised, he says. Don't be surprised by suffering. We're all going to suffer. And so, church, sitting here in the year 2020, let me ask you just some simple questions that I think are so important for us to consider as we, as believers, are following Jesus. Like, let me just ask you a few questions. And it revolves around this question: how strong is your faith, really? How strong is your faith? Like, what would make you quit on your God or on your church or on your fellow believers? How strong is your faith? Is it strong enough to endure persecution? And I know the easy answer to that, as Americans sitting literally in our living rooms right now, watching church on TV, is like, yes, of course I can endure persecution. But honestly, persecution for us right now is abstract. We can't even really get our minds around what that would look like. It's almost unreal for us. Church, how strong is your faith? How strong is your faith? Is it strong enough to endure vehicle troubles just over and over and over again in the midst of a short amount of time? How strong is your faith? Is it strong enough to endure the coronavirus without leaving us feeling helpless and fearful and hopeless in our lives? How strong is your faith? Is your faith strong enough to withstand getting your feelings hurt? Is your faith strong enough to withstand having somebody say something maybe not so nice about you? Is your faith strong enough to endure when you feel like you're not getting your needs met? Is your faith strong enough to endure when things don't go your way or when they do something that you don't like necessarily? Is your faith strong enough? How strong is your faith? It's sad. I just believe it's sad that because of the reasons why people leave churches or why people, talk negatively about the church or about other believers. Like in the first century, our brothers and sisters in the church were literally getting killed because of their faith. They were getting set on fire. They were getting crucified. They were getting stoned. They were getting burned. They're getting their heads cut off. Like they were getting real persecution. Like that was the test of their faith. That was because of their faith. And yet so many people now get all worked up because somebody said something not so nice about us. And we leave the church and maybe even walk away from our faith because of that. Or because somebody painted a wall a color that we don't like. Or because they did something that we didn't voice our approval of. Or we get so offended or so hurt because somebody didn't visit us. Or somebody didn't call us. Or somebody didn't say hi to us in the store. Or whatever the case may be. Like we get so offended and so hurt by such little things, honestly. And yet I have to just keep coming back to the question, how strong is your faith? Because in heaven, like I don't even want to be a part of that conversation. Like somebody who leaves the church because of some reason like that and goes up and starts talking with somebody who endured first century persecution. And they ask, how were things in the year 2020? Well, I got really upset because they painted the wall a color I didn't like. Or, I left the church because, somebody didn't say hi to me or give me a call when I felt like they should. Or I didn't feel like my needs were really getting met in the church. I don't even want to see how that conversation unfolds because it starts there and then the first century church person goes, I was burned because of my faith. I was killed because of my faith. I was persecuted, like I lost my entire family because of my faith. Church, we have the opportunity now to allow our faith to flourish, to spread in ways that the first century church just had no opportunity for. Let us commit to not being surprised or not being defeated because of suffering. Church, let us now, in the midst even of everything going on right now, let us commit to not being surprised or defeated because of suffering going on. I want you to, at home where you're at, I want you to say these things with me this morning, just kind of as a commitment to us all, committing to live here as well as there. Let's say this together. This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. I live here, but my home is there. I will obey Jesus. I will allow grace and peace to be multiplied in me. I will live hopefully. I will live joyfully. I will never quit. I will never quit. Church, let us commit to being followers of Jesus who are not surprised by struggle, who are not surprised by opposition, who are not surprised by dysfunction, by hurt, by pain, by suffering, by difficulty. Let us commit to not allowing our faith to be torn down, to be defeated because of struggle that takes place in our lives. Let us be encouraged by the words that Peter gives. Let us be encouraged by our study through this book. And let us not ever quit. Heavenly Father, I am so thankful for your word, and I'm thankful that we get the opportunity 2,000 years to hear these words written to churches spread throughout an area that were undergoing extreme persecution and pain and struggle. God, I pray that we would not just forget these words, but that we would be encouraged, that we would be uplifted, that we would be challenged in this as well, even in our own lives. God, I pray that we would commit to not be upset by little things, by little offenses. But God, I pray that we would lead with grace, that we would lead with peace and joy and hope, that we would lead with surrender in our lives and allow you to just continually change us and draw us closer to you. God, we thank you for Jesus. Thank you for everything that he did for us on the cross. God, I pray my life be surrendered to you and to him every single day of my life. I pray that for our lives, everybody who's listening as well. We love you. We thank you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.